Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're tackling something I know a lot of you are interested in, how to really nail those daily English conversations, sound more natural like a native speaker.
Definitely, yeah.
We found this guide that seems to be packed with practical tips and advice, and it's really got me intrigued already.
Yeah, I've had a chance to look it over too. There's some really good stuff in here.
It seems to really focus on not just the grammar rules, but the actual way people speak in everyday life.
Exactly.
Which I think is super valuable.
Absolutely.
So are you ready to kind of jump into this guide and see what gems we can uncover?
I am. Let's do it.
Okay, awesome. So right off the bat, the guide kind of stresses the importance of starting with the basics. Like greetings, common phrases, small talk, the stuff we use all the time, but might not always think too much about.
Right. And I think, it's easy to overlook those things, but they're really the foundation for everything else.
Yeah, it's like you wouldn't expect to play like a super complicated piano piece without learning your scales first, right?
Exactly.
You got to have that solid base. So, what does the guide say about how we should approach mastering these kind of foundational phrases?
Well, it really emphasizes understanding the context.
Oh, okay.
Like when and where to use certain phrases.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Take something as simple as, "What's up?"
Right.
It's a super common greeting, but you wouldn't use it in every situation.
Oh, for sure not. Imagine saying that to your boss in a formal meeting.
Exactly.
Yeah, probably not the best move. But with friends, in a casual setting, it's totally fine.
Totally. It's all about feeling out the situation.
Reading the room, so to speak.
Exactly.
Okay, so context is key.
Yeah.
Got it. Now, another thing the guide delves into, and this is something I always find super interesting, is pronunciation.
Yeah.
Because I think people often think, I just got to learn the sounds of the words, but there's so much more to it than that, right?
Oh, absolutely.
So what kind of insights does the guide offer on pronunciation?
Well, it really stresses that pronunciation goes beyond just the individual sounds.
Okay.
It's about the rhythm of the language, the intonation.
Like the music of it almost.
Exactly, the music of the language.
Yeah, and I think that's something that can be really subtle, but it makes a huge difference in how natural you sound.
It really does.
Think about even a simple phrase like, thank you.
Right.
You can say it in a way that sounds really flat and almost sarcastic, or you can say it, thank you, and it sounds really warm and sincere.
Right, exactly.
So, how do we actually work on that? How do we get better at that kind of musicality of English?
Well, the guide suggests a technique called shadowing.
Oh, okay, I've heard of that.
Have you tried it?
I've dabbled, yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, basically, you listen to a native speaker, and then you try to imitate them.
You're kind of mirroring them almost.
Exactly. You're mirroring them. You're trying to copy their rhythm, their intonation.
Yeah.
And it can feel a little strange at first.
Oh, yeah.
But it's really effective.
It's almost like, if you were learning a dance routine or something, you'd watch the instructor and then you try to mirror their moves.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's that same kind of concept.
Yeah, I like that analogy.
Now, the guide also mentions something else that I think is super important, and that's immersing yourself in English media.
Oh, yes.
Things like podcasts, TV shows, movies, even music.
Yeah.
How does that tie into, sounding more natural?
Well, it's a great way to just absorb the sounds of the language without even really trying.
Okay, so it's more of a passive kind of learning.
Exactly. Passive learning.
But it still has an impact.
It really does. You start to pick up on patterns, on rhythms, without even consciously realizing it.
It's like osmosis almost. It's just seeping in.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about mastering those basic phrases. We've talked about the importance of pronunciation. And now I want to move on to something else the guide touches on, which is the structure of sentences. It talks about using contractions, understanding the difference between formal and informal language.
Right.
How much of an impact do you think those things have on daily conversations?
I think they have a bigger impact than a lot of people realize.
Okay.
It really contributes to fluency, to sounding natural and effortless.
Okay. Yeah.
For example, I am going to is perfectly grammatically correct, but in everyday speech, you'd probably naturally say, I'm gonna.
Gonna.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
And those little shifts, those little contractions, they make a big difference.
Yeah, it's almost like, I don't know, it's like taking the training wheels off of your bike.
I like that, yeah.
You're not thinking about every single word. You're just kind of expressing yourself more naturally.
Right, you're just flowing.
Yeah, exactly. And the guide also, it emphasizes this a lot. the importance of actually speaking the language.
Yes.
Of practicing dialogues.
Yeah.
Of not being afraid to make mistakes.
Absolutely. I think that's crucial.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts on that? Like, why is it so important to kind of embrace that real world practice?
Well, I think it's because, you can study all the grammar rules you want. You can memorize tons of vocabulary.
Right.
But if you don't actually use the language, if you don't get out there and speak it,
yeah,
you're never really going to internalize it.
Right. It's not going to become part of you.
Exactly.
And I think a lot of people, myself included, can get really caught up in the fear of making mistakes.
Oh, absolutely.
It's like, I don't want to say something wrong.
Right.
But the guide really encourages people to kind of let go of that fear.
Yes, and I think that's so important.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember when I was learning my second language, I was so nervous about making mistakes that I barely spoke at all.
Oh, wow.
And it was only when I started just letting go of that fear and just talking, even if I made mistakes, that I really started to make progress.
Yeah, it's that idea of fluency over perfection. It's more important to get your ideas across and to communicate than it is to be perfectly grammatically correct every single time.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, now, this is the part of the guide that I was really excited to get to.
Okay.
Because it talks about idioms and slang.
Oh, yeah.
And it calls them like these secret ingredients to sounding like a native speaker.
They really are.
So, why do you think idioms are so important?
Well, I think it's because idioms, they add so much color and personality to language.
Okay, yeah.
They reflect a culture's unique way of thinking.
Yeah.
Instead of just saying, it's raining heavily, you can say, it's raining cats and dogs.
Raining cats and dogs.
And suddenly, it's more interesting, it's more memorable.
It paints a picture.
It does, it paints a picture.
It's more engaging.
Exactly, and
Yeah.
people remember it.
Okay, so idioms, they're like the spice rack of the English language.
Yeah.
They're there to kind of add flavor and personality.
Exactly.
But of course, the guide also cautions against, using idioms incorrectly,
Yes, absolutely.
because that can really backfire.
It can.
So what are some tips for navigating that tricky terrain of idioms?
Well, I think the most important thing is to pay close attention to the context.
Right.
Listen to how native speakers use idioms in different situations.
Yeah.
Don't just memorize a list of idioms.
Right.
Try to really understand the meaning behind each one.
The feeling behind it.
Yes, the feeling, the essence of it.
Yeah, it's not just about the words themselves.
Right, it's more than that.
Okay, so we've gone from those foundational building blocks to the subtle nuances of sounding natural to even the art of using idioms effectively.
Right, it's been a journey.
This guide really does seem to offer a pretty practical roadmap for anyone who really wants to master daily English.
I think so. It's a great resource.
Yeah.
And it really highlights, the key aspects of mastering a language, from pronunciation to grammar to confidence to cultural understanding.
Yeah, it's all connected.
It is.
So, for all of you listening out there, here's something to think about as you continue your language journey.
Okay.
What are some everyday situations where you find yourself wishing your English skills were even better?
Interesting question.
Yeah, think about that.
Yeah, think about that.
Because the key, as we've learned today, is to keep practicing.
Yes.
Keep experimenting.
Absolutely.
And keep embracing those aha moments.
That's what makes it fun.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us for another deep dive.
Thank you.
I'll see you next time.
See you next time. Bye. Bye.